Well, so let's,
Okay, go ahead.
okay, we should open our meeting, our JMRL Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Okay.
Looks like we just have one major order of business, which is to review the equipment budget, proposed equipment budget that staff sent around to the budget committee last week. So let me pop that on the screen. And we've got paper copies here if anyone needs any. There we go. Paper copies, anyone? Okay. On the behind the agenda, there is a page that has a summary there. The paper copy is updated correctly to have the anticipated year-end fund balance read 6/30/25. The digital one that I've got here is not yet corrected, so just Jerry wanted me to point out that this bottom line here should be, that's what the, this is looking a year out, so it's hard to say for sure, but that's the anticipated budget at the end of next fiscal year. Okay.
Okay.
So we're anticipated to be starting July 1 with $412,000 roughly in the fund balance for the equipment fund. And the projected revenue is $175,000. And the expenses that you see on the detailed version of this is $305,000. So just as a reminder to folks new to the budget committee, the equipment fund is designated in our regional agreement as the area which JMRL collects revenue, fines and fees largely, keeps it aside from our operational costs that we charge our jurisdictions for and buy all of our equipment. So this AV setup likely came from the equipment fund, these chairs, this computer, those types of things. Annually, we ask JMRL's branches and departments to submit requests for equipment. And then the business manager and myself will go through and vet them, make some decisions on things that might need to wait or things that we can take care of right now, smaller ticket items. And then we'll put together this proposal for the library board. The budget and finance committee will review it today. That's what we're doing. Ask any questions that need to be asked. And then submit a proposal to the library board for them to consider to be included when they vote on the final budget for 25 in June. So the board will have 2 full meetings with this as well. If there are any questions about it. Okay,
David?
So no questions. Yeah, go ahead.
When you're talking, I can't understand what you're saying. When you're talking and facing everybody else, I can't, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay, the microphone is up in the bar up at the top here, so we'll try to direct our voices that way.
Oh, okay.
Anything that needed to be, well, you didn't hear what you missed.
Well, I got this information here, so you can go on forward. I think
Okay.
I'll be okay.
Use context clues. Okay, great. So what you're looking at on pages 2, or rather 3 and 4, the last 2 pages of this document are the requests as is from each branch or department that have been collected and put in front of you. Brandy asked some questions in advance, which were good. We can address here as well. So if you look at the central line there were several different requests for book trucks. These are different specific items that have different needs. Some of them are transporting things back and forth. Some of them are display. So they have different costs, and they're very specific detailed items that they sent to Jerry for, I need this thing. And then I think the other question had to do with a cost that was asked for a few times. So it was a phone charging station. Some of those came out of the technical services budget here, and some of them came from branches directly. And largely that's just a matter of who asked for it. Managers are supposed to coordinate their IT requests with Kayla Payne. And sometimes that is a broad category, anything with a plug, she likes to say. So some managers might have asked Kayla, hey, can you put this in your request? Some of them just asked for it directly because they considered it to be closer to furniture than a computer. I will say that the system that Central is looking at is a more complicated one. The rest of them kind of look like an orchestra or a bandstand, and they've got some cords hanging from them, and people can leave phones on them and then have them charged. The system that Central's looking at is a more secure system where you could close a little locker with your phone in it, similar way you might see at an airport, or that the Shannon Library at the university now has that system. So that's the difference in the cost there. One of them is thousands of dollars, and the others are relatively cheaper than that.
Can I just ask a big picture question?
Yeah, please.
So I'm just curious, it looks like the 2025 expenses are higher than usual, is my guess, or, I mean, like, based on the fact that it's higher than revenues and higher than the end fund balance. So I was just curious, is this like, was there less spending last year and more this coming year, or what's
I
the
think
context?
the requested budget this year is actually slightly smaller, is that correct, than the requested budget for 24?
It's actually $1,000 higher.
So it's about the same as what we're spending on for this year. We usually find throughout the year that expenses are lower than the budgeted requests. Things come in cheaper than we were anticipated throughout the year. Jerry's able to find a better deal for things, than what we're projecting right now, or we can save money on shipping, things like that. So I wouldn't say that that's an unusual amount for the past few years.
So is there another source of revenue for, like, the gap between 175,000 and 305,000 is big? Like, expenses are a lot higher than revenue, that's
Yes,
what I'm.
and especially if the board is going to consider reducing that stream of revenue as well. So there are other things that come into this category. Do you have any examples of
Other revenues.
other revenues that make up the equipment fund?
Yeah, there's bonds fees, and we've used the E-rate reimbursement.
Yeah, so
So
those,
those are the major, sometimes there's a small amount of contributions, small amount of surplus property revenue as well.
So we're carrying forward 412,000.
correct. That's what we're starting the year at.
And is that the general practice that you carry forward?
Well, we have been carrying forward around that amount for the last few years. It has been over the last 20 years, kind of up and down from there. I've never seen it less than about 100,000, and this is about as high as I can remember, which is one of the reasons where we were less kind of picky about the requests in there, because this is a pretty high balance to hold.
And I think to layer on to David's point as well about the gap there, on the expenses, we're conservative in this could cost here, but so we were conservative, not on the expensive side, but trying to anticipate what.
I don't want to hold this up, I'm just confused of the $125,000 of expense beyond the revenues. Like, if that was true every year, you'd be going into major debt. So
Yeah, we couldn't do this every year. We couldn't spend $300,000 a year and you made $175,000. It would last three to 5 years. What was the projection, Jerry, you did the other day?
Yeah, but in that range, yes.
Right. So, at some point, we're gonna have to make some very difficult decisions about the equipment budget and how it's funded and what we can afford to get. There's nothing really on this list that I see as fluff. There are things that we could do without for a year or two, but eventually, most things on here we're kind of.
these are like real needs, and the
Yeah.
revenue's not really needing them.
Yeah,
You would have, this seems unusual that they wouldn't be part of the operational budget.
there are definitely things in here.
The whole formula of having equipment be, not part of the operational budget. seems-
It's unusual, it's unique to JMRL in a lot of ways. So other libraries, libraries are constructed in a million different ways, 97 different ways in the state of Virginia. It's pretty rare that there is kind of a separate fund that the library relies on for equipment that's not tied to operational costs that come from the jurisdiction.
So eventually we might have to visit that.
Eventually, we will have to revisit that, either talking to our jurisdictional partners about how to fund this moving forward, or leveraging gains in state aid, or even talking to our endowment fund about ways to support this. those are the options when it comes to, if we're gonna drive the revenue down as well, those are the sources that we have. Jared, did you want to say something?
Well, you were probably into one, but just as a point of reference for the current fiscal year, that gap between revenues and expense will probably just be about $25,000. So that's probably being conservative with revenue projection and conservative with expense projection. So, so that layers it, but maybe you were heading towards what you have up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another thing is that if you look at these IT costs here, these are the general technical services costs. A lot of these really are not equipment. They were funded at the time out of the equipment fund because there was money there and the jurisdictions weren't able to or willing to pay extra money for things that have lived here now for years and years and years, but they're really ongoing operational costs. So if you look at these software type things, yeah, like the chat software is a good example. I think my favorite is maybe the
Cybersecurity.
cybersecurity, where's somewhere in here, there's your email, basically. There's the funding that we spend every year to have the Google Workspace for JMRL comes out of equipment funding, but like that's not really equipment. It's not a chair, it's not a table, it's not a computer, and it's not something we can do without at this point. Unfortunately, I'd love to do without email. But Google Workspace, so it's $11,000 right there. That there's really no way that you can justify that as an equipment expense. But we have for the past 5+ years because we have yet to move it over to the operational costs and then ask Charlottesville, Albemarle, and Louisa Nelson to pay their share of it. It's a way to keep their costs down at the expense of this fund. So if you look at this total here, this subsection, not all of it is in that category, but that's $181,000 that you could make a very good argument should be funded by our jurisdictional partners, not from the equipment fund. However, we've already set operating budget for next year. We can't go back to the funding partners and say, oh, hey, we need $180,000. It would have to be done in the fall when the budget committee and the board is looking at the next year's, when they're looking at 26. We'd have to move some of these there. So that's a conversation that I think the board should have.
Technology, I mean, it's like technology has changed this system.
Well, it's,
The philosophy is.
yes, and Tony and Peter and Kayla could tell you that the way that technology is bought now is no longer like you buy this CD and you own this software. It's you're leasing it, basically. So I could see where many years ago, the thinking was, we're gonna buy this computer software. But that's not the way the world works anymore.
And also, if we ever look at being, fee-free, then that would also,
It would severely affect us, yeah.
so there's some things to.
Yeah.
Policies to.
That's one thing definitely that the board would have to consider if they were to consider a fine-free library. Jared is working on some stuff that we're gonna present to the board this month, but, the money has to come from somewhere to buy these things.
Right.
So we'll have to figure it out. And the equipment budget as is written into the regional agreement. So making major changes there, JMRL can't do it in a vacuum. It needs to happen with their jurisdiction partners. Okay, so we could go through this. You could ask questions that you have. Anything that stuck out, sometimes the language that staff uses, like we'll know what a thing is, and then library works. What is that? So if you see any of those in there, now's a good time.
Well, I thought Randy's questions were great.
Yeah, excellent.
And they were the ones that kind of jumped out as well. But you responded that all those different book trucks, there's actually separate things.
Different book trucks, yeah.
Which is different from a miscellaneous bin shipping.
Yes. We did pull a couple requests out of the equipment request, and we're gonna ask the CACF endowment advisory committee to fund them instead. One was for a redo of the tables and chairs in the Gordon Avenue meeting room space, which I think the Friends will appreciate because they use that space. So basically things that we would consider a project, not kind of ongoing operational or equipment needs got pulled. not too many others, I can't remember, but as we discussed a few months ago, I'll bring all that stuff to the board. to look at as well.
So I do have a question out of curiosity,
Yes,
because one of the things I noticed is like Louise is looking for 7 new tables for the meeting rooms.
yes.
What would they be doing with the old tables? Would there be able to sell them to get more money added back, or?
The library takes our surplus equipment to the city of Charlottesville's surplus sale, and when it gets sold there, we get a percentage of the funds. If
Does
it's,
that go
if
back
it's
into
used,
the equipment fund?
that would,
Into
Jared,
the
that's a good
revenue?
question.
It's actually been used into the operating budget, but it's really talk a little bit about that equipment complex analysis. That's where it's. It's at the most, it's 4,000 bucks a year.
And it's only stuff that's usable. If it's broken, then we'll just.
Oh,
destroy it. Yeah.
We offer it as well, if it's useful to other branches first.
In fact,
Now, what did you say that you said that it goes to Charlottesville, surplus?
it goes to their surplus sale. So they have a
Uh-huh.
warehouse basically where they take their own surplus equipment and sell it. They have an auction service and then sometimes it's open to the public. So it goes there, and if it sells, the revenue comes back to JMRL.
Okay, so it's not like a percentage or anything, it's just whatever you it's sold for?
I'm not sure, Jared,
It's
you
a
know,
percentage.
it's a percentage.
No.
Yes, so that has been not easy the last few years because of kind of COVID shut that store for a little while. And we stored a lot of things, but it's starting to open up again. So we can sell those things and get some money.
I don't think that's very much, it's very much money either, because a lot of the stuff in that sale is like dirt cheap.
That was Jerry's point. He thinks it's maybe a few $1,000s a year at
Yeah,
right, I would guess that. And we also, Alita, I don't know if you heard, the other part of that was that we'll try to move things around from branch to branch if it's usable and not broken. So
Uh-huh.
actually Louisa's request for tables here, we're currently moving tables from Scottsville that they're not using to Louisa to meet a short-term need. If those work out, we might end up buying less here. So that's another, to Peter's question about what we're asking for, what we need, we'll save money where we can. If there's another place that has tables available. Everybody wants north side's tables.
The meeting room table?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, they're very nice.
So one of the other advantages of having the city actually do our surplus is they haul it away.
no.
Well, actually, we have to haul it to them.
Right, but we don't have to be responsible for it after that. It's then their
Yes.
responsibility.
It's a place to bring in and we don't have access to, yes, absolutely. Okay, so any questions about any of the specifics? I know it's a lot of line items there, but we tried to get as much detail as we could in there. For the budget committee. So you'll notice, like, Brandy, if you're looking at Louisa, it's really in two places. It's in the regular equipment and then in the technical services. Yeah, for a printer and for our phone system. Which, as we learned today, can't wait too long because there were no phones in Louisa this morning. It's fixed now.
And if we were to decide that we're not going to have an equipment budget, but roll it into operations, that would be quite an effort because we'd have to decide what is a jurisdictional cost and what is a central cost. That I imagine that'd be a lot of work for a certain budget director to try and parse that out for a budget request that we would then make to the jurisdictions.
Yes. Right. The other thing that's not reflected in this request is the need for a new box truck for JMRL. We have currently 2 box trucks and a third that, if you recall from last summer, is on permanent loan to the Friends. We have an MOU
Right.
for them to do the upkeep. And they get driven hard. They ride a lot of miles every day. So I believe our newest one has got how many miles on it?
150,000 so.
150,000 miles, so we're okay for right now, but we're gonna need a new box truck in the next while. That probably will run between $100,000 and $125,000 depending. So Jerry and I talked about this. We think the thing to do is to wait until we have the final numbers in for fiscal year 24, then come back to the board in the fall with a proposal for purchasing that either out of the equipment budget or out of the operating budget or out of a carried over fund balance from either one. So just to have it on your back burner there, there's another need that's not reflected here. Mid-year, staff is gonna come back probably and ask.
I mean, how is that defined? Equipment or outboard? How about would be outboard?
Generally, we would buy those out of equipment. We have bought trucks out of equipment before. But, you know, you could make an argument that it's an operational need. It's pretty clearly equipment, I mean, that's a thing that you can point to. Anyway, we'll see where the dust settles at the end of fiscal year 24 before coming back to the board and making a recommendation. Board should be aware, though, that there's gonna be a big expense mid-year next year.
I was just curious about philosophy, about kind of allocating funds for this between the branches, like, do you sort of aim for parity where, you know, Scottsville has, you know, equivalent level of technology or what have you to Scottsville to Northside, or is it kind of based on, well, Northside has way more people using this, so it's gotta be just
Usually it's needs-based, you know, in terms of like for the computer replacement, those tend to be on, the oldest gets rotated out. And those get allocated as they're needed at the time, like who has, so it depends on if Lindsay's machines are older than Ann's machines. Some of the equipment, it's also space dependent, so Lindsay might have space for something that Scottsville wouldn't have space for. But we tend to in general look for what the needs are and then for what the branch can support. It doesn't really get into either or type situation, you know, we try to do and situations where it's, okay, well, here's the needs for Scottsville, here are the needs for Louisa, here are the needs for Gordon. How much money do we have and can we make it work? That's my philosophy. Not hearing any questions,
Out of curiosity.
yeah, please.
Were there, besides the box truck that'll be coming up later this year, was there anything that was requested that isn't shown here?
The only things that aren't shown here are the aforementioned projects that the CNCF for. So I know it's furnishing for the meeting room at Gordon Avenue. I can't remember what else, Jerry. A few other things that were basically, we could identify as here's a project, you know, a one-time project. That's the distinction that we've been using that I mentioned to the board, rather than kind of, we're replacing this equipment. Everything else that was requested is in here. Some smaller ticket items are being purchased this year. Some people ask for things that were like under $100 and we'll just buy those out of the equipment budget without going to the board with them.
Are those smaller items coming from what's possible what is it? Overage that was not spent, or where are they coming from?
They'll come from the equipment fund balance. So yeah, some of that is just what's in there from what hasn't been spent before, and some of it is the total amount that, you know, this year-end balance will be a few, here I can show you on here. This year-end fund balance might be a bit smaller from those smaller items
Mhm.
that get purchased this year.
Mhm.
Unless Jared
So
already.
purchasing this year is in the fiscal year 2024.
So Jerry, all the, like every library that we've gone to, so that since I've been on board, have all said that they don't need as many laptops as they used to. Their computer labs are.
Desktop computers, that's
Desktop,
plugged in,
a bunch
seated stations.
smaller, because people can, since the COVID. So that's equipment that we would give to the city to sell. I mean, what do we do with all those?
They go to the city surplus sale when they're aged out.
Okay. So that would have been a significant amount of equipment, right, that we Not really.
Every year we'll have, like, I think the request is probably for around 50 new machines to swap out 50 older machines. So there will be about 50 machines coming off of either the public desks or staff desks.
Needed.
Yeah, these are the ones that are being replaced.
Mhm.
So IT will keep and salvage some of those for our own use. They'll keep them for parts, they'll keep, there's memory and power supplies and things that they can potentially use. And they'll keep some just in case of an emergency, like if Lindsay goes in and her computer doesn't work tomorrow, they'll have a few they can give there. So it's probably not a one-for-one swap, but it's probably more than half of them will go to that service. You find the answer to what else is going to this.
So there was a few items, some of which you said, that we moved from the equipment request to CACF, which is TV and meeting room upgrades at Lisa, children's seating and play equipment at Northside, and
Okay, I need to step away for a minute.
Okay, thanks, Alita.
and a few other items that we didn't, we pulled out of the request. Or either request entirely.
Yeah. The only thing that we pulled out entirely for this year was, that I remember, is a request for a rethinking of all of our cash register machines at every location to get a system that's compatible with our integrated library system. And it was about a $40,000 cost and a big project to replace all of them. And talking about what our capacity was to implement, go out to bid and get the things, and then install them everywhere. We decided to hold that for a year. Right now it's piecemeal. Everybody has a different make or model. They don't reconcile with the computers.
So that's something you'll have to do.
Down the road. These are great questions. Any more? Lindsay, any questions?
That's very clear.
Did you hear what Jerry said about the children's area there? We're gonna ask the CSEF to fund that.
For the furniture.
Yeah. So effectively, it shouldn't make a difference. The time frame is the same.
That's it.
Yes.
Furniture is worn from overuse, which is great.
It goes quick, 10 years, seems like a long time, but. Okay, well, is the committee comfortable making a recommendation to the board after we, they haven't seen this yet, so those will go out in the handouts for the board's May meeting. And they'll have a chance to ask any questions or to ask questions during the board meeting. And then they're not gonna vote until actually in June, so there's plenty of time to make changes if they identify anything.
Yeah.
Anything that was out of the ordinary or unreasonable.
These committees, because there's one person from each jurisdiction, it's like most of the board is already involved in the budget committee, so you'll have to hear the same things twice in the full board meeting. Okay, great, so Alita, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, to recommend what we've got here
Yeah,
So-
unless there are any, and we'll change the typo on
on the 2024.
here. But unless there are any other suggestions or questions, recommending this just means we'll put it in the handouts for the board to review. And
Right.
you can tell them as the chair of the committee that we reviewed it.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Easy peasy.
Anybody?
Sure, anything else? Okay, you want to close the meeting?
Oh, that was quick. Okay, I guess we can close our meeting there. We don't need a motion, so let's just close the meeting.
All right, thank you, Leah, thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.